Hey everybody, it's Emily at Schooling, and welcome back to another episode of Homeschool Tidbits. Welcome back to Build Your Library's Homeschool Tidbits. Today we're going to be doing episode 32, and we're going to be talking about morning basket ideas for parents. In this weekly video series, I'll delve briefly into a topic related to homeschooling, and I'll share some of my knowledge and expertise with you guys as a longtime homeschooling mother of 4 children, 3 of whom have graduated and 1 who is a college graduate. Now, I've talked extensively about morning baskets in general, but today I want to spin that discussion in a different way. Have you ever wished that you had more time in your day to read? Or wondered how to fit in more reading into your day? Well, enter morning baskets. Self-education is important, and it's a vital part of homeschooling. Think of it as personal development. So why not set up a morning basket of your very own? Why is self-education so vital to homeschooling? I mean, isn't this about teaching our children? Sure it is. But you want to be the best teacher you can be. And you also want to be a good influence on your children. And what better way to show them that learning continues after the school years? Maybe you don't have the time to go back to college, but you can definitely find 30 minutes in a day to read a book on a topic that you're interested in. And just because it's called a morning basket doesn't mean it needs to be read in the morning. Not everyone's a morning person or has the bandwidth to read first thing in the morning. And if you're anything like me, you are rolling out of bed with just enough time to grab breakfast and get the school day started. Look at your day and find that 20-minute block of time where you can schedule in personal reading for yourself. Maybe your morning basket time is going to be in the afternoon while your children are napping, or maybe it's going to be after they've gone to bed at night. Maybe you find it difficult to squeeze in any time to just sit down and physically read a book. Well, that's where audiobooks come into play. If I'm having a really busy day, I'll put on an audiobook and I'll listen to that while I'm folding laundry or cooking dinner. So now what goes into your morning basket? Literally anything you want. There's no rules here, but you did come here to get recommendations, right? Like that's what I do. So I'm definitely going to give you some. I like to use a pretty simple system for this. 1, my first rule is to always have a book going. Doesn't really matter what. Just I'm always reading something. Another simple way to go about this is to have 1 nonfiction book, 1 fiction book, and a book of poetry. And then you can just rotate through that. This gives you a few things that you can rotate through and keep yourself from getting bored and keep your mind sharp. Perhaps you can take inspiration from your children's studies. If they're learning about ancient history, perhaps you would like to read something at your level based on that same subject matter. I recommend checking out History Book by Book. I'll leave a link down below in the description to search for titles. I'm also going to give you some recommendations right now because of course I am. So let's just jump into some recommendations for your parent morning basket. Because this is a morning basket, books with short chapters are your best friend because you want to have something you can read relatively quickly in case your day goes haywire and you maybe only have 10 minutes now to read. This way you get something you can read pretty quickly and still feel like you've accomplished something. So first I want to recommend the DK Big Ideas Simply Explained series. This is a great option because, like I said, short chapters. These are literally 2-page to maybe 4-page spreads, and they're really quick to read. There are also a huge amount of subjects that you could jump into with this because there are just so many books in the series, from philosophy to medicine to art history, to world religions. There's something for everybody in this series. It's a great way to expose yourself to lots of new ideas and information. Next, I want to recommend The Secret History of Food by Matt Siegel. You might like to try studying history through a different lens. This book is going to tackle the history of food, specifically where food comes from, where the name might have originated, and things of that nature. I like this book for a morning basket because it's easy to read and it doesn't go super in depth, so you can get through it relatively quickly, and you'll still feel like you can follow along even if you only read half a chapter at a time. Next up is a favorite of mine, The Anthropocene, reviewed by John Green. I am a huge fan of the Green brothers, and I was so excited to read John Green's book when it came out. In this book, he shares a series of essays, and he gives each thing that he's talking about in his essay a rating on the 5-star scale. He shares his thoughts about humanity and anxiety and his love of Diet Dr. Pepper. It's a beautiful collection, and I highly recommend getting the audiobook because it's read by the author, so it's a great listening experience. And my last nonfiction recommendation is a memoir, and it's called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory, and this is by Caitlin Doughty. This was another one of my favorites, but a favorite from last year. I loved listening to the audiobook. Again, it's read by the author, so it's kind of like listening to her tell you her life story. And I was just riveted because she talks about her childhood and what led her to her fascination of death and to ultimately working in a morgue. And if you've ever wondered about the inner workings of a morgue or what happens to you after you die, physically, not spiritually, then this is definitely a book you should check out. I love a good memoir, and this one is one of my absolute favorites. Now let's talk about some fiction recommendations. We all have different tastes and criteria when it comes to what we think makes a good book. Maybe you like to read classics and books that challenge you. Perhaps you prefer easy-to-read fiction. I'm going to try to offer you titles that cover both of those things together. First up is Beautiful Little Fools by Jillian Cantor. Maybe, like me, you were assigned to read The Great Gatsby in school, and perhaps you liked it, but you wished you could have gotten more of a backstory on the female characters. Well, have I got the book for you. Cantor's writing is just beautiful. I absolutely must read everything she's ever written now because this book was stunning. She manages to make you feel sympathetic to characters that were written to be very unlikable in the original. And she also turns the story into a murder mystery. Do you think you know who killed Jay Gatsby? Well, guess again. Cantor gives us a backstory for Daisy Buchanan, Jordan Baker, and Catherine McCoy, the sister of Myrtle Wilson. And in telling the story from their perspectives, you do get multiple perspectives in this book. It puts a feminist spin on the story. It definitely is going to make my top 10 reads for 2022. Next, I want to recommend Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan Mcguire. This is the first book in the Wayward Children series. It's an ongoing series of novellas. So the reason I chose this in your morning basket is because these are novellas, so they make for very fast reads, but the writing is still very beautiful and rich. These stories are all about children who have stumbled into a magical world, but then ended up coming back to our world, and they don't want to be here. So they find their way to Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, where they struggle with being back in their own world when they were royalty or had a great life in this fantasy land. So this series revolves around the students of the school as they struggle with being back in our world, while also solving a mystery and getting some really cool backstories about the different worlds these children have come from. Like I said, because they're novellas, you're going to read them really quickly, and it just gives you this great feeling of success to be able to finish a book relatively fast. And there are many books in the series with more to come out each year. Next, I want to recommend another favorite for me this year, I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. The writing in this book is so vivid, you really feel like you're there. It's almost like watching a movie rather than reading a book. I really felt like I was there bearing witness to this time and moment in history. The story is so compelling, and the chapters are all very short, so it makes it hard to put the book down, so you're going to feel compelled to keep reading, which is always a sign of a good book, isn't it? Sepetys paints a picture of a time and place where even your own thoughts can be dangerous, where everyone or anyone could inform on you at any time for the smallest of infractions, where you have to wait in line an entire day just to get one potato or a small amount of cooking oil, while the leader of your country lives in extravagance, where you speak in whispers because you don't know who could be listening, where no one, not even you, can be trusted. This is another one of my favorite reads for 2022, and because it has such short chapters, it makes a perfect addition to your morning basket. And my last fiction recommendation is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I'm sure at this point everyone's at least heard of this book, but I definitely want to recommend you check out Madeline Miller's writing, even if you're not sure this is for you. This is a retelling of the Iliad, specifically focused on the relationship between Patroclus and Achilles. This is a romance, and it is gorgeous. Like, the writing in this is so beautiful. I'm obsessed with Madeline Miller's writing, and I will read literally anything she writes in the future because I just know it's going to be great. Having read the Iliad, I knew what was going to happen in this book. Like, I know the story of what happens to Achilles, but I still cried because his story is written with such a big emotional impact. You can tell that Madeline Miller has put in a lot of research. She really knows her mythology. I'd also recommend you check out her other book, Circe, which, if you are interested in learning more Greek mythology, that is a great option because it's going to go and cover so much more territory than The Song of Achilles, which is focused specifically on the Iliad. Both books are beautiful. Both are also relatively easy to read while still being gripping, challenging, beautiful writing. And next I want to give you guys some poetry recommendations. Maybe you're intimidated by poetry. Check out Why Poetry by Matthew Zapruder. If you've ever felt intimidated by poetry, then this is the book for you. I'll admit, poetry has frequently intimidated me. Even poems that I love, I feel uncertain that I really understand them the way they're meant to be understood. This book helped me to realize that I do in fact get poetry, that anyone can, that poetry isn't beyond me. This book might even inspire you to put pencil to paper and try writing your own poetry. Next, I want to recommend Poems to See By. A comic artist interprets great poetry by Jillian Peters. I'm recommending this because now that you've read Why Poetry and you have a better understanding of poetry, now you're going to want to try to read some, right? And this book is a perfect place to start because the author is going to share 24 classic poems. Some of them you might have read before, some might be new to you, and they offer them to you in a new format. They're going to give you illustrated poetry, so it looks like comics, beautifully artistically rendered. But giving you the poem with pictures to go with might help you to better understand the poem or maybe see it in a completely new light. Next, I want to offer something a little more modern. I'm going to recommend Call Us What We Carry, Poems by Amanda Gorman. If you want to feel like you really get poetry, this is a great book for you. Her poetry is powerful. And it's also really easy to read and so easy to understand, especially because it's really relevant and so moving. You will not be able to stop yourself and read just one poem. And finally, the last book of poetry I want to recommend is the Echo Anthology of International Poetry, edited by Ilya Kaminsky and Susan Harris. This is a beautiful collection of 20th century poetry from all over the world. This book is a great way to expand your horizons and your tastes in poetry. I hope that you will put together your own morning basket. You can use my ideas and recommendations that I've offered you today, or you can come up with your own titles. Build your stack and keep it handy on a side table or in a basket if you want to be more literal here. Choose a book to read from that stack each day, or rotate through and read a little bit of each one each day. It's your stack. It's your morning basket. Do what makes sense to you. Maybe you just want to pick up whatever you're feeling inspired to read that day. You can't do it wrong. Either way, however you choose to do your morning basket time, you are on your way to a richer self-education, as well as inspiring your own children to continue their learning outside of school time. If you found this video helpful, I hope you'll check out Build Your Library curriculum. Build Your Library is a secular, literature-rich homeschool curriculum inspired by Charlotte Mason's philosophy of education. Based on nearly 20 years of homeschooling, I created the curriculum that I wished I'd had when I started homeschooling my own children. I have spent thousands of hours cultivating the best literature to enhance your children's studies. Our lesson plans make homeschooling simple. Just open them up, gather your books, and go. Our easy-to-use lesson plans include everything you need to homeschool. Just add math. Choose from our full-year K-12 levels, as well as our fun topical unit studies and our newest product, Lit Bites. With Build Your Library, you will cultivate a home library filled with captivating literature, and you'll raise children who become lifelong learners. So snuggle up with our lesson plans and a great book or three, and have your best homeschool year ever. I hope you enjoyed today's tidbit and found it helpful. Let me know down below what is some of your favorite resources for self-education. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks so much for watching. Come back next week for more homeschooling inspiration. Until next time, happy reading. Bye.